Here we go. It's the outstanding Kurt Doolittle.
Hello, you handsome devil.
Oh, you rogue.
That tie, that pattern, that color, that jacket on you, absolutely fantastic.
Dominating the room once again. Kurt, I want to thank you for showing up. It's a
Really?
Oh yeah.
Like showing up is half the battle, isn't it? Something like that. Showing up is half the battle.
90%.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm working on this thing now. This is interesting. It relates. This is but the symbol I'm working on is cuneiform. Okay.
Yes, you showed me this. I like this.
Okay, so it's like this. We're working on this cuneiform, and it's what's interesting about this unequal sign, right? So
Yeah, but does it say unequal in cuneiform?
it says it in all languages, sir. It says it. See that? What's interesting about this picture? It's two parallel lines, which cannot exist in reality at all. Isn't that amazing? I only thought of that because I've been talking to you for so long.
Oh, that's great.
It's like parallel line. It's an illusion. It can never be parallel.
Yes, that's true.
That's just a little error of human perception. And so I'm working on my coffee is brewing. My life continues to.
Mine's over there. I have to go get it. So tell me what you're doing. I'm going to go grab my coffee while you're talking.
I'm going to tell you that my life just keeps on getting better and better.
It does.
It's amazing to me. How does it do this? And it's like this week has been a bit rough.
It's been rough. How can it be rough when the Supreme Court just handed us?
I know it. I'll tell you why. Because yesterday it dawned upon me that, in fact, we may be to the point at which the lefties are going to force the issue, which is to make us make the choice between ballots and bullets.
Well, go ahead, and then I'll see if I can come up with a counter.
My assessment is this: they're obligated to force the issue all the way to the bitter end. It's like playing chicken with idiots, and it's like, okay, so they must inevitably lose, but that doesn't mean that they are not going to go down swinging, and that's okay. It's okay, but it's like at this point I'm like, okay. Now I'm getting real serious about my final preparations. I'm like, electricity, what happens if the electricity goes out for 90 days, right? And planning for such eventualities. Is your coffee ready now?
Well, it was only down to like a fifth of a cup. So I figured if I'm going to talk to you for a bit, I need to
get ready.
I need to fill up the tank, so to speak.
Okay. I'm full. Look at that. I'm all full. Showing the staff the full cup of coffee. I'm ready to go. So it is like where to get water, where to maintain electricity so my freezer doesn't unfreeze. Just plotting for such things.
You know, I'm going to try to see if I can counter it. I don't know if I can.
Good luck.
Well, I just want to make sure it just how to falsification is how you understand.
Right. Good luck with that one.
Well,
it's like they're just going to fold up their hands and walk away from the table. Honestly, Kurt, how dare you?
No, but they'll change.
They're going to do something. They're going to morph somehow. I think that's what they're going to do.
From the whole history of the Marxist program to its newest from its conversion from Jewish separatism to Marxist class conflict to race Marxism, to identity Marxism, and its postmodern destruction of speech, all that right through the whole series, they have believed that they were the righteous.
Yes.
And that they were providing something new that the established order didn't understand, that they were the cool new smart kids in the original, which is how you'll find the Jewish guys in particular will call it the cool kids. And so it was an academic fashion that worked its way down. And so I'm not sure, these people are fundamentally whiners.
And it's sophomoric.
Right. And so when people get tired of your whining, you have to find something else.
Okay.
So I can't quite figure out the most intuitive thing is to switch from moral righteousness and undermining to begging for mercy and moral shaming. And so it's just very hard to see the left organize any kind of arms.
I know, but it's like this. This is what caused it. This Roe v. Wade thing, and that there was an aggressive assault upon the state house in Arizona last night, which is what I expected. But it's like, okay, and we'll see how this progresses. It may progress from mostly peaceful to somewhat peaceful.
I would like it if they did, for the mere purpose of having the opportunity to state we have unequal protection under the law. As such, political bias needs to be treated as religious or sex. In other words, because that's what it is. Because we know increasingly that political preference is a genetic bias. I mean, it's at least up there in the 80%, like everything else. So, you might have a 9/11 and a few liberals get a little less liberal for a year, but eventually they'll migrate back to some liberal, justification, because they're always trying to escape responsibility for social self and other cognitive and emotional regulation. So I don't know. So I would actually, something Bill Mayer said last night or the night before was, well, we have like half the population is expecting a civil war, but that's not really true. Half the population wants a civil war. That's actually the right answer.
That's awful. That's just awful. No, I gotta say this just for the audience now, Kurt. This is episode 2030. Please hit like and subscribe right there. And that button right there, I don't know what it does. And that one, the one that makes it ring when it gets posted. And we'll see what happens next, especially because we're going to look forward to reading the comments below. Sorry to Kurt for the interruption.
It's just that I don't know how to, the left went through its, revolutionary phase. It definitely went through its violent phase. And so what's generally happened is their violence hasn't worked out very well.
It's because they can't organize.
Oh, it's not true. I mean, I don't know. I always think of us, I mean, it's Aspie thing. We always think everybody's equal. But so I can't, I remember the 60s when there was a fucking bomb a week.
Yes.
Or 2 bombs a week by the Marxists. So, and I remember the kidnappings and the whole shit, right? So I remember the Marxist revolutions.
Yeah, but it's not very well organized. It's sporadic and disorganized. That's
I
good
don't-
terrorism. They're good at terror.
I disagree with your,
Okay.
in that you're calling organized how conservatives see organized as when they organize by continuously searching for opportunities and exploiting them. That's
Okay.
all they do. It's a continuously incremental process that doesn't need a strategy except to undermine.
Okay.
So to say they're not organized, I would say the opposite. I would say the
Okay.
right isn't organized, and the right can't organize for the reasons I've described elsewhere. So,
Okay.
I disagree.
Well, now, generally, we will organize under state auspices.
Right. Well,
And it's like, well, the state is under control of others at the moment.
right. It's like
So
somebody
it's like
said
you're
to me,
prevented from organizing.
right. So somebody's talking about Trump, and I'm like, look, I can tell you the names in a line between me and Trump, because we all know that line, right? Well, on our side, we know that line, and it's just a few steps, right? And so if Donald Trump had wanted a revolution, or he wanted one today, if he asked for it, it would happen in 36 hours,
Yes.
right? So I'm like, you can call about insurrection all you want. That wasn't the goal of January 6th.
No.
And that's not his goal. What he wants to do is hold in his position the moral high ground of being right and leaving a legacy of exceptional rule. I understand him. He's a very traditional European, militaristic, Germanic, hierarchical guy, right? So he's just saying that's what he's looking for. So he's looking for high status in the traditional way we would achieve it. If that fucking guy wakes up tomorrow and says, I'm done with this shit, we're going to have to do it. It's just not in his nature to do that. I mean, I just know, because he would see it as too much work.
I don't know. That's what caused me to become concerned yesterday, because I'm like this. It's like they may cause him to change his mind.
Well, he'll change his mind if the chance of success leads to him being leaving lionized as a heroic legacy.
That's it.
But he's not going to take it on the chin. Like, that's what most revolutionaries do. They like, come hit me. I want it. I like it, right? The attention is good. But they want to do the work of managing that attention. Trump doesn't want that. He wants to be CEO. He wants to just say, this is what you need to do, and go do it. And of course, he's fighting an entrenched bureaucracy that's 60 years behind the times and doesn't want to change. So that makes perfect sense. But if he wanted to have a freaking revolution, I know, because I know what he would have to say, and I know he knows what to say, right? He just won't say it, because why? That would lower in his mind, that would lower him.
Right. So
he
it's
would
a status loss.
Right. So he would have to, for him, it would have to be, this is out of hand. I have to save us.
Yes, that's the point that I am agreeing with.
Yes.
We're in agreement.
Okay.
However irritating that must seem to many people, especially the audience, and not least of all, the unparalleled Kurt Doolittle.
I'm woven from the same cloth, so to speak. So I just, it's like the same thing with Putin. I just understand the fucking guy, I mean, he's not complicated to me. And I think the reason is that too few of our people have ever had enough power that they understand how important the political aspect of power is. Right. And so you always have to have some sort of political power. In my history, there always evolves a cult of Kurt, which, if anybody who ever works for me has seen this, will break out in laughter, because it's so fucking true. right? So that's how I build it, right? I build it by being the Yoda character, right? So, but Trump did it by being the authoritative feature and the demanding authoritative person. And so we all do it in our own basic ways. But the average guy has never had, he's never been aristocracy, because that's what I mean by the term. He never had to be competent in a sphere and have the power of the sphere and actually understand what he's doing. Like some people get into these jobs and they have, it's because they're in a position of obtaining political influence, whatever, and money, and they actually don't know how to manage it. The favorite one is the Facebook guy.
Zuckerberg.
I mean, he's an ass clown politically.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, he's an ass clown. And so, whereas if you go out and you look at Jack Welch, who's gone from GE, and it's a tragic loss for GE, its shareholders in our country. You get like him like that, and he understands it perfectly. So Trump actually understands perfectly. He really does. He understands. He also understands you talk to, like a general, you talk to the men, not the officers.
Yes.
Right. He gets the whole fucking thing, I mean, and I just find it so funny that people think that because he's not particularly fast on his feet when it comes to a rhetorical discourse, that he doesn't know exactly what he's doing. Because I mean, he does know exactly what he's doing. You can't imagine being him, because he's not a bureaucrat.
That's right.
Right. He's not a politician.
That's right. He's operating in a different sphere than you are accustomed to operating in.
Right. And so it's like, I know a lot of guys, I designed some of the software, or I redesigned the software that a lot of the really big construction companies use. Right. And in getting with that, I got to meet all the big guys from all the big names people have heard about that build big things around the world. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're like street smart working class guys. They're working with billions of dollars. But the thing about those kind of guys is they're not credentialed, they're demonstrated. And so the difference between credentialed and demonstrated behavior is your understanding of man.
That's right.
So who does Trump deal with?
People.
Construction companies, right? Unions, government bureaucrats. Right. My favorite example, go find the show early on where he tries to promote his CFO, and his CFO comes on television and practically has a nervous breakdown. Right. That's how the country is run, by demonstrated competency. In his field, he's incredibly effective, but try to turn the guy into a politician, whatever. Yeah. Take a credentialed person and make that credentialed person have to demonstrate competency. It'll be just as obvious, right? I can't tell you how many PhDs I've hired that can't do anything except
they're used to operating in a very protected sphere.
Actually, they're used to answering questions that are 6 degrees of separation from implementation.
Okay.
Right.
So inflated in their function.
Well, I mean, think of it as like this. What happens in any decision tree is there's a guy somewhere who's either turning dirt into metal,
right,
or taking the metal and bending it, right, or making a machine that helps him bend it, or just work your way up the thing. So it's not that we don't need these hierarchies. When you go to a PhD, here's my which wife was she? My first wife's. My first wife's father was a metallurgical engineer.
Nice.
Right. And what they do is actually interesting. Right. It's pretty, because they have to figure out what composition of elements are in this thing, what temperature it has to be for this set of mixture to cool over this length of trough. I mean, it's all math, right? I mean, so you need that guy, but how many degrees of separation is he from the falsification of his theory? Not many.
Right.
You know,
That's right. He's operational.
Well, yeah, he is operational in the sense that, and it's also important that his feedback loop is small, right? So the problem with the reason I don't like to be a CEO really is the feedback loop is years, right? You have to stay 2 to 3 years ahead of where your company is, and you have to be thinking 5 to 10 years ahead of it. Right? Because that's how long it takes you to move the fucking boat. You know, it's like this. I have a friend who is a friend of a friend, is a friend of, old friend of mine. He used to drive B-52 bombers. He says,
Nice.
well, I started out flying jets. And if you move a jet, you take this jet, you go like this, the whole fucking thing instantaneously goes like that, right? I mean, faster than you can think, sort of like how I felt driving my Ferrari 911 X50, way too fast for human reaction times, right? But you get into B-52, it says, you move that stick and a couple of miles down the road, it starts to move.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Well, that's the problem with being, and so what happens in companies, I'm trying to keep two avenues of thought going here at a time, but
Okay.
what happens in companies is, and it happens in governments, and it happens in any kind of place where you have authority, right? You have any authority at all, is there all of a sudden your desire to actually do something measurable, creative, is now so disconnected that you end up doing things that are disconnected. Most CEOs demonstrate this by acquisitions of companies they can't handle. Right, which is
not a useful thing to do.
Not a useful thing to do. Most financial firms do it by leverage buyouts of companies they are incapable of managing and fairly understand. But this happens in credentialism too, right? It happens in political systems where people are wanting to find, they're credentialed, they feel they're superior, they want to exercise this mind, yet what they're really in is a maintenance job.
Okay.
And so what they do is they look, work will expand to fill available time. Now, that's a nice way of saying it, but what work will? Well, their self-satisfaction.
Justification, yeah.
Justification will expand. So this happens anywhere where there's enough distance between the actions you take and the negative feedback loop, right? That happens. So this is a
distance. Distant
Correct.
from the Red Queen.
Correct. Thank you. So hierarchies are necessary because what you get is this, I think of it this way, there's me and my CFO, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, I view my CFO as don't let me fuck up, but you
right.
probably can't. Otherwise you can't.
I like that guy.
Don't let me fuck up, but otherwise it's unlikely you can add value. I actually prefer to hire a person who doesn't have a CPA for that job, because for the chief financial officer. And the reason, unless you're in a public company, it gets too complicated. But the reason is that you get the same problem in accounting. So, realistically, if you have the usual head of accounting, their job is to do accounting, it's a certain kind of person. But the minute you get a highly paid CEO in there, they want to be creative. There's no value in you being creative. That just means you're going to get me in more debt. And I'm not going to realize it because you've played some game with the numbers that aren't showing up on the balance sheet of the income statement. And that means I've got to go digging to figure out what you do. And the number of times this has happened to me in my own company or a company I have tried to acquire and I found it is, or a company I have consulted for and found it.
Because it's like this. You made it look better than it is.
Is right. I want it to look falsificationary, right?
Real clean.
Well, yeah. I want it to look pessimistic.
Yes.
So the problem though is that who's above them is the banker you're getting a credit line from, but the banker you're getting a credit line from doesn't want it to look pessimistic. They want it to look as regular as possible, despite the fact that all businesses do this, right? And so the whole trick in most businesses, you need to get enough scale so the ratio of your volatility to your stability
Right.
It looks like
Tolerable.
noise, right? Well, it looks like noise.
Yeah.
It's not enough to make a banker nervous. Then above the banker, you've got your investors. Now, your investors aren't worried so much about the monthly variation. In other words, the noise level.
Right.
They're worried about the bigger moves,
Right.
and especially they're worried about growth, because unless you can grow it, they're not going to get their appreciation, because they're betting on appreciation, not income.
Right.
Right. You're betting on income stream, right? The bank is betting on income, and they're betting on and the investors are betting on income streams, right? Not income streams, appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Value. And so you have these different customers out there that are demanding different financial information. And so my always thing is, I want to know the operational P&L of the business. Now, what we think of as the cash business.
Yeah.
I want to see that. Then I want to see the EBITDA business,
Yep.
which is the things that don't have to do with government interference in the business.
Right.
I want to see the banker view, and then I want to see the investor view. And when I tell that to a CFO, they're like, "What? I don't, that's like hard work." I said, "It's just more complex posting, right? It's not harder work. You just have to isolate what it is." Because it's like when somebody says, "Well, we made a profit this month." You go back and it's because they sold off an asset that covered a loss. I'm like, that we didn't make a profit. If I can fix it. Another, I want to know, there's people in the business who are running the business profitably, right? And businesses do this. That's fine, right? Volatility is just part of life, right? That's volatility is why the labor theory of value doesn't work, because the labor always wants to get paid, even if
regardless of its actual value. Because the kids are going to get hungry.
Yeah. So labor theory of value assumes that everything they do has value and generates profit. Actually, no, it's really fucking hard to make a profit, which is why I put everybody who works for me through what I call the money talk. Now Eric Adams is out teaching the money talk. And so the money talk is how money actually works, because nobody's ever told that in business. And they don't know that your local gas station, the only reason it makes any money is by paying off it makes enough money to pay off the debt, to buy the land, which they can later sell off, because that's all gas stations is their land acquisition methods, right? They grow from appreciation. That's all it is. You don't make money. Those things are. They can't believe that most businesses struggle to make twice the rate of inflation, which means can't believe that their supermarket makes 1%.
Yeah.
In a 3% market. Well, they just make a constant 1% over a very large number. But that's why your supermarket is hard to mess with, is because they don't make any money. Your corner store gas station doesn't make any money, right? And so you have to get up to your guy who fixes your car doesn't make any money. These things, these are subsistence businesses, right? It's a really small, tiny set of outliers that make money. And you might be lucky if you can, like in my companies, I try to make your goal is to make 14% or 15%, right? Which you would think is a lot, but it's a services business. So the lot of profit is trashed by the high volatility.
Right.
And believe it or not, I'm going to tie this all together.
I'm watching it. I'm very impressed by this.
It may not seem it.
It's quite diverse. It's like, isn't it, kids? Everybody strap your seatbelts in, because this could get bumpy. I don't know.
So you get this issue of you get your small businesses that might make 15 or 20%. But again, the reason they make 20% is because they're not selling products, they're selling services. But they're going low profitability for commodities versus higher profitabilities for services. but those services are highly volatile, whereas the sale of Hunt's tomato sauce is not fucking that volatile, right? I mean, in the sense of being equal to, I mean, it's not going to vary by 80% as some incomes do, or even retail. I used to buy retail shops, right? And so, you know, some retail businesses make 60% of their yearly income between November 15th and December 30th. I just try to imagine you're trying to keep your store working and alive and in debt 11 months of the year, and you make all your profit in 4 or 5 weeks. And if you have a bad weather Christmas season, you go out of business, right? So then you get up, and so people say, but look at Microsoft and Apple. I'm like, let me talk to you. How many companies tried to be Microsoft and Apple or Google? And
Right.
failed?
There's a boneyard on the way.
That is a vast.
Wow.
That,
Yeah. They're littering the side of the highway all the way to California.
It's just how my favorite example is, you know, before there was Silicon Valley, there was Boston. There's Wayne Computer and Digital Equipment Corporation and Prime Computer and all those things. They're gone. Houses in Boston in the 80s lost a third of their value
Wow.
when that happened.
This would be a good time to cue the sound of crickets.
Guys who had been making technology salaries in Boston that are the then equivalent of the technology salaries that are being made in San Francisco today went down to looking for minimum wage jobs just to pay the mortgage. All right. I mean, I had people coming to me. I was advertising for programmers.
Yeah.
Where I think $30,000 or 30. Now this is $1,980, so it'd be like 65 or 70 today. So it would be half of what, you know, half of what you'd try to charge. So, and I was getting loads of them, you know, guys mid-career who had mid-career. I'm like, why would I hire you? You don't even know how to think about programming anymore, right? The way and the amount of supervision I'd have to give you, you know. Whereas I hired a guy, his name was Chris. I hired a guy who'd gone into one of the banks, right? They'd asked him to write a program to help with managing a particular kind of asset. And he put the entire floor out of business. In other words, he made it so one person could do the job of 75 people. Right? I'm like, I'm going to hire that guy. Right? And he's only $35,000. Right? So at the time, just like
that's right. That's right.
So, you know, I mean, we've gone through this phase before. Anyway, so I'm trying to point out that yeah, you look at the Microsofts and whatever, you don't realize that most business, like restaurants, they all fail, right? I mean, if there's a restaurant alive today, it's a statistical, you know, especially the ones that go for a long time, it's a statistical analysis.
Anomaly, yeah.
Anomaly. So, so the way you actually do a restaurant is the way you do a gas station.
That's right.
Which is you try to pay off the buy and pay off the building because that's so much of your costs. And once you get the building paid for, then you can actually run a restaurant.
That's right.
Because of the volatility, right? And then the problem with a restaurant is it's getting worse every decade I've seen, is you have to redecorate. You know, the banks want you to redecorate every 7 to 11 years, but you actually need to redecorate every 4 to 5. So, and redecorating is expensive. So the way you know a restaurant is doing okay is that they're actually able to redecorate, right? They have hot chicks,
right?
They know how to redecorate. Their table use is fairly high, and they own the building. And so the minute you can get to that, and there are plenty of them that have done that, that's fine. But you have to get there before it's a good business. And it's still the most easiest to fail at business in the world because there's so little tolerance for error.
That's right. It doesn't take much of a slip up.
So anyway, so what's the point Kurt's trying to make here? Well, the big one is y'all don't know what the fuck you're talking about much of anything, because the people were taught all this political ideology. They weren't taught how personal money works. They weren't taught how business money works, and they weren't taught about how scale money works like business and industry. In other words, there's a difference between small business and then industry. And they weren't talking about the kind of personality you have to be able to manage that.
Right.
And then then they talk about and you're like, okay, those things that I just described, they're all meritocratic.
That's
they're
right.
They're not built by certification.
No,
Right? They're not credentialists.
this is good.
So,
Here it
but
comes,
what's
tying together. I can see it converging.
what's our government built out?
Oh
It's built
my.
on credentialism. Now, secondly, the credentialism they've built out a credentialism in a thing that there's almost no market feedback loop.
You're right.
Right? So there's no responsibility, no
The
accountability.
Red Queen
and
is
no
nowhere
liability.
to be
There's
seen.
no Red Queen to be seen at all. So there's no the only evolutionary pressure is systemic failure.
Oh,
Right?
well, come to speak of it,
Oh
it's
yes.
right around the corner.
Yes. So the problem, the thing that you want, of course, is it's not to say that a politician, the ability to speak in political terms isn't valuable. My point is, it's better learned by acting lessons than it is by participating in politics. And that credentialism should have no bearing on who gets hired in a government. We should hire people from business and industry and the military in order to feed the government. Because the people who are credentialed, the academy, and so, they're all fucking idiots. And it's demonstrable that they're idiots because there's no negative feedback loop. So I don't, so what did I just do? What did I do to get that face out of you? I don't even know what I said.
It's like
It's like
this,
Martin
it's like
teasing me
they
because I've
haven't
said
been-
something I think is offensive.
It's the fact that they haven't been subjected to the via negativa of the competitive marketplace doesn't make them idiots. That's all.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like
It's just merely they have not been their metal has not been tested.
right.
That's all.
And and this is worse among pure politicals, because because if you're a CEO, like I bought a company, I'll evade enough details so nobody could ever figure out which one I'm talking about. So I bought a company, right? They're pretty good size. I'm gonna get all the devs in there, and they're like, "Oh my God!" I'm talking, and I start explaining their business to them. It's the first time they've understood their business. Right? I explain their business to you, which is what I have to do whenever I acquire a company. To be honest with you, is explain the business to the people, because the reason I can acquire the company,
there's a reason for this. They don't know what they're doing.
it's like all of us, we run on a mythology.
That's right.
Right. And so but the truth is, people really like the truth when it empowers them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm taking this company, and I know the CEO, and he's not incompetent. He's sold other companies before, but he's not competent in this one. And so I get in front of it. We finally get
one that counts in this case.
Well, I mean, they're flat, right? They've been flat. Well, I mean, they're flat for really stupid reasons, and which I sort of explain to them. And this all comes from money sending direction downward instead of operational analysis of the chain between at what's being done with the customer, what's being performed, and the money, right? You wanted this operational analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Pure, right? So what do you think business process engineering is? It's operational analysis. What do you think continuous recursive disambiguation is? It's operational analysis. So what do you think the problem with credentialism is? It's a failure of operational feedback loops, right? What does continuously recursive mean? It means continuous feedback. If there's no continuous feedback, it's not continuously recursive. In other words, it's not evolving.
That was wonderful. I want to thank you for that, because it was that was useful.
So
it's not fast, it's not operational if it's well sitting, is what you just said.
Correct.
It's collecting dust and rust.
Well, it's okay, but like if you go to, there's guys who have military careers, right? Right. And the military is a procedural based organization. Right. Now they don't do great customer service, but they follow procedure.
Okay.
Right? They're not credentialed.
No.
They came up through an operational process of working with guys who have
Make things
85 to 95, maybe 100 IQs, and getting them to do complex shit together in a highly organized fashion by following very specific rules. And if some general somewhere or some captain says this isn't working right enough, you change the rules and operate by the new rules. That's actually the government you want. You want what's called a Prussian model of
Yes.
government. So the problem is we've created a credentialed, right, which was a mistake, because the credentialed system that arose in England and in Prussia came out of the military. It didn't come out of the academy. Does this make sense?
Yes, I understand.
Right. And so what we wanted in this country was to continue our process of bringing people in from commerce and the military, people who have extraordinary feedback loops. And then all of a sudden we started getting people beginning with our first macro fucking moron, which was World War One.
Wilson.
All right. You get these credentialed people in, and they're living a mythology, not an evidence. And so we have an academy and we have a government that's populated by people who are living by a mythology, who are trying to talk to each other, and they're dismissing the populace. Whereas a general and a CEO, you have to talk to your workers.
Yes.
Right.
I understand you.
Right. And so this is where you and Quigley call, I think it's Quigley, the overproduction of elites, right?
No, that's Turchin.
They're not elites.
We understand one another.
Right. An elite is aristocratic. What does aristocratic mean? Rule by the best. How do you know they're the best? By demonstrated capacity in a field that is mercilessly sorted. It sorts mercilessly, right? So, I mean, I sort of think it's humorous. Well, Mark Zuckerberg, of course, wouldn't be in control other than he did the right thing, which is a lot of people should do, is create a stock system where you can't be replaced, right? Right. I think that's actually fine. The problem is he actually is terrible at his job. Whereas I always bring up Jeff.
Not good. He's not a good judge of his own capacities.
Well, he's not a good judge of morality.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Right. And so this is the problem that spread around the cult of San Francisco is it's a cult of exceptionalism. In other words, it's a cult. And so it's a separatist cult of chosen people. They think they're chosen, right? And special when they're actually demonstrating that they are just virtue signaling, and that's all. And so they found a business that is completely speculative advertising, that has no accountability advertising, that however does provide access to a market advertising by trading a free service, right, which is
yes.
Communication, in exchange for being subject to advertising, right? And the fact that this is made possible by the cheapness of the internet. In other words, they free ride on the backbone. Right? Whereas in the past, well, this is a great analogy. In the past, every country had to have its own military to guard its own shipping. In the past, every communication system had to be paid for by the people who were communicating, right? But the internet did what to information in the global information system, which was to provide public subsidy of a universal transport system, what the Romans did to roads and what the Americans and British did to the seas, which is we reduced the infrastructure costs of transport. I'm making too many macro associations.
You're doing fine work.
Okay. I always get afraid I'm going to lose. In my joy of exploring the map, I will communicating the macro associations across the map. I will lose the audience. So anyway, the real net here is that what you snuck in there. You always get ahead of me. You stuck up in there, which is anything that doesn't have a red queen.
That's right. You want to be near the Red Queen because she's very valuable.
Right. And so the way most organizations, monopoly organizations challenge this, the way militaries challenge it is war games. And so what I've recommended, and I did this the minute we got into the COVID thing, is why did the CDC fail? There's no war game. All right. Why do governments fail? There's no war game. Why do treasuries fail? There's no war game. Right. Does that make sense?
I have to tell you about the failure of the week, which is the medical. We've talked about it a little bit. Medical record keeping.
Yes.
I was on Monday morning. I went to a meeting, and we had this meeting because there was a particular failure of communication between the physicians at the discharge of the patient, and didn't go to the primary care, and for a variety of reasons. But it came down to how was the communication going? And it's like, it boiled down to this crazy thing, which is the specialists informed us that they read the note of the people who made the referral. That would be me. And I said, you read the 16 pages of nothing? Why? I said, there's a particular part of the referral process which says, note to provider, that I dutifully fill in as the secret back channel communication to the specialist to tell them what is really going on in a succinct manner, like not even a sentence. It's a phrase that says, here's what you get with this patient. And this is the orthopedic surgeon says to me, we never see that. They didn't even know it existed. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. I was talking to the other primary care guy sitting next to me. He's like, well, I always fill that in. What are you talking about? And it's like this. No, we never see it. They didn't even know it existed. It caused me to stand up from the table and take a step back and then turn around and sit down. And it made people laugh because it's just utter disgust. Because it's like, what is the purpose? It's all.
Who the fuck made that decision?
Well, it's like, so the CEO of the hospital was a little embarrassed, and rightfully so. It's the government got a hold of the damned record, and it's all in there. And now we know who to hold responsible, regardless of the fact that it's not useful to anybody. And it's like this, and it's like, it occurred to me this, that the physician is such giant wheels, okay? Such giant wheels. It's like, I just get my money and retire and be done with it because there's no fixing this. It's not fixing.
Well, of course, I disagree that there's no fixing it, but I would argue that in any technological information, right, there is always overextension, right, to the point of failure. And it's that point of failure we reach where we find the innovations. So what you're talking about has always happens.
Okay.
Right now, the reason this happened is, in this case, is the same that happens in any data system. There's too many people in a decision-making line with too fragmentary information.
Yes.
Right, and so they make decisions that they lack the knowledge to make the decisions. Yes. And so, I've been given that I've spent a lot of my life solving this particular problem.
Yes.
It's really it's a competency problem.
Yes.
Now, so this brings us to the next level of the credentialism problem.
Oh, very good. How
Right.
unexpected that segue turned into something useful. Kurt, you're like Rumpelstiltskin.
No, I just connect the fucking dots.
Thank you, buddy. It's a
So-
high value item. Do it. Connect the dots.
So look, so here's what happens. The same thing is, the problem. I don't want to leap to. I want to leap to the conclusion, but then I'll take all the joy out of the story. And so I'm trying to say, how can I tell the story joyfully and humorously, so that I can come to the conclusion, so the conclusion will stick. And so I'm having a little trouble doing that.
So stick the landing.
So the landing is really quite easy. Is that stories get shorter. You know the telephone game?
Yes.
You're right. You tell us the person next
That's
to you, and that
exactly
person
what it
tells-
is.
Right. And so what happens is that the story gets distorted with every.
Yes.
So, and I think I've probably told you this before. What I've done with companies in the past is I get a room and I fill it with whiteboards. I mean, the big ones on the walls. And if I have to bring new ones on, and I tell them, I don't care what it costs, just go pay for the fucking whiteboards. You know, if you're worried about the price of the whiteboard, which is
We are in
$100,
business.
I
We are
get
not-
paid $700 an hour. All right, you're making the wrong. You know, you're making the wrong choice. I promise you, what I do is valuable. So I'll just diagram their whole fucking business out, and I like it in if I have a room where nobody can get into. So I just use colored markers, and I diagram like from the instant a request comes into the organization from this or event or whatever.
Mhm.
So in software, there's a name for doing this, which is you just do a thing. What's the most common and explicative use case of your piece of software? In other words, what's going to cover 80% of the functionality? Because that's how everything works, right? That's why you get bugs over in weird parts, because it never gets tested, right? But the main thing usually works.
Right.
So you do this to the corporation, right? Then you go out and you build off. So I pull people in and I walk them through how their business works, and they're always floored. Now this takes me a while, right? I can't fucking do it overnight. It might take me a week or 3 weeks or a month, right? It's not whatever. So you have to have the patience. But the reason is it's an operational
That's right.
decision. It's not a window. Right. And so if you have a window, you develop a myth. My favorite one in this particular case is between the researchers and the lawyers. Excuse me, the researchers, the paralegals, and the lawyers. The amount of information loss in that sequence was amazing to me.
Interesting. Okay.
And so in your business, it's the same thing. It would be between the provider,
Yes.
the data system,
Oh, yes.
and the specialist,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so it's the same problem, right?
Yes.
The same problem exists everywhere. It's that there's actually when you tell people you're going to learn this job, you're going to learn the mythology of this window.
Yes.
Right? So now most people say, well, it doesn't pay for us to create an operational definition of the business, because that operational definition of the business is going to change. That's correct. So which thing are you going to pay for? Right? Maintaining, going through once a year and revising this thing?
That's right.
Or in creating an operational description of the business, or which is really, it's really, I mean, it's a 1 to 3.
Right.
Even a big company, it's not that big. It just takes work. And then you go through with every, and when they're doing it, you're just asking everybody in every job
Yes.
for 40 minutes if they understand the inputs, actions, and outputs. Right? That's it. It's called
That's
business
it.
process engineering, right?
I have to tell you another story now.
Wait, I just want
Okay.
to close. So it's like the real answer here is that if you only have people who are credentialed. That's a mythology. That they're only can't have local information. They're in a particular piece of the business that they only see through a window, right? Then they're operating on that mythology. If they're in a department, they only understand that mythology. And so there's all these mythologies going together. And what we hope is that rules do it. But that's not the same as understanding, right? And so the difference between a rule and understanding is the rule is what is the summary of the understanding, right? And so it's like any statistical function, it loses information, right? The rule is what you do right? But the understanding is why you do it.
Yes.
Now, if you know why, you can absorb errors, identify errors. But if you launder causality, you can no longer identify errors. So this is why stupid things happen, like the people in the financial sector retire because of this set of windfalls, right? In the 90s or 2000s. But now you've lost all those people who went through the 70s and 80s economic crisis, and there's nobody with it operational understanding, right? So we've built this whole academy system wrong. What we want to do is amplify what the Germans did and build the what do you call it? Apprenticeship system.
Yes.
That's the answer to pretty much every problem. And the answer to the apprenticeship system is there's if there is ever a point at which you're no longer in a market, you have to create a negative market, which is a war game to test it with. And so the institution we're missing is that.
The war game business.
Right. So to some degree, regulators try to provide this goal, but they have the wrong attitude, right? The wrong objective. We're looking for people who are trying to make an organization fail, right? It's okay if you fail, but we want you to fail on something that isn't the core mission of your organization under duress. The CDC being a great example, the fucking academy being the most horrible example, and the government being another horrible example.
Wait, I would not call them horrible examples, but exceptional in their way.
Yeah, I mean, horrifying.
There you go. Now we're
horrifying example.
Yes.
So the problem though is that people don't want to be subject to testing. That's what part of what people want to be credentialed for. That's important. Right. Is evasion of testing. That's one of the things I like being an entrepreneur versus a tested person because it's under my control. That's so I'd rather be an entrepreneur and be tested by the real world than tested by some political system, which is what's happened.
Oh yeah.
So if you don't war game, you develop all sorts of regulations and rules and whatever. But those become self-reinforcing of the very credentialism we're trying to overcome. So the only way to fix an academy or to fix the medical system, any system that's become corrupt, is to try to make it fail. And so that's really easy. In my business as a retailer, we use secret shoppers.
Yeah.
And we send secret shoppers around, and they try to trick you, get you to steal, whatever, right? And it was amazing, right? So that's actually what you want. You don't want, and I can't tell you how many people we fired after they stole 30 grand.
Oh my!
It was common, right? And an interesting place was the custom framing business. Custom framing is no different from custom car stuff, right? I mean, it's highly overpriced, right? For what is actually, it's a custom job, but it's highly overpriced. And so there's a lot of room for all sorts of shenanigans, right? So if you're going to take a deposit, you write down, you actually write down the stuff and you go frame it, and you give a person a thing with this, but you pocketed the difference, right? And so but that happens everywhere. So secret shoppers. Well, how does the military do it? They do it by war games.
They do it with their secret shoppers are mean.
So notice that, yeah, exactly. So notice that I didn't say the medical industry does it.
No,
The
it's like,
financial industry does it, the government does it, and the academy does it, the advertising industry does it. I mean, can you imagine what happened if we tried to get advertising? We used the equivalent of war games against advertisers. We have the most honest advertising. So this is the difference between this is just increasing the scope of falsification in the economy to compensate for what the anonymity that occurs as market scale.
all right. Now can I tell my story?
Yep.
So I met this lady, new patient, 95 years old.
Was she
She's
flirting
in the
with you?
car. She's in the car.
Was she flirting with you?
No, of course. She was in her car and she was ill. So I'm meeting the lady for the first time. She's ill in her car and she's got some virus. She claims that she has COVID-19 because she tested herself. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at her and she just looks funny, right? See, this is what you pay me for. You pay me to hang out with you and go, that's just wrong. And I don't know exactly what's wrong, but I know what tests to run to figure out what's wrong. So I sent her to the hospital in addition to treating her for her COVID-19 thing, which isn't going to get her. And I discovered that she's just terribly anemic, like critically anemic. So she needs a transfusion. So I order a transfusion. And it's like this. So it's like, where do we get the transfusion? It's like getting a runaround from these nurses, okay? Because it's like, you can't bring her here. She has COVID. I'm fine, right? And it's like, I'm like this. I'm like, you see, it sounds like I write an order, and it sounds like an order to you, but it's getting rejected by the system, right? It's systemically rejected in some fashion that it's not making it to accomplish its operational objective. So I'm like this. She got her transfusion. They brought her in the back door later the next day or something like this. And I'm like, so I call up the I maintain back channel communications with people because I'm like, okay, I don't trust the system to do its job at all. I'm going to tell you what happened so that you can do what you need to do to make it work the way it's supposed to work, which is, this is what happened. And so I told the guy who manages the clinics, and he's a nurse and he knows what's going on. So he'll adjust.
You had a man-to-man conversation with someone competent.
That's correct. And
This is
there's
how we solve
no
almost every problem.
expectation of the system functioning at all. All of us are like this. The system can't function. It's destined to fail. It must fail. There's nothing coming but failure. Our job is to keep it running as good as we can while in process, right? That's all. But it's like, that's all it is. So it's back channel communications is all I develop parallel processes that are that's the way I see to do it, because I don't know how else to make it function, because I don't trust.
Yeah, I don't, I always view it as a captain and sergeant problem. So what the nurses are sergeants, and the medical and the general practitioners are like, I want a transfusion, right? I want these, whatever else, the procedures from. That's your fucking job, right? It's not you don't say you can't have that or whatever. You say, yeah, you can say, what you can say is, I think you've made a mistake because those two drugs don't mix, right? That's okay, right? You can't say, oh, well, I can't administer this because of some procedure. I mean, no, what you do is you go figure out how to get it fucking done.
The best.
I don't understand why they don't fucking get it done. I don't get it.
The best is an ICU nurse from Vietnam when I was a fresh, wet behind the ears intern in the ICU. She just looks at you and goes like this. Are you sure that's what you want to do, doctor? And it's like, think about it real hard, because she's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's why you want sergeants and nurses. That's their job, right? Is that, goals and methods, right? You're trying to get the patient there, all right? But don't let me fuck up, right? Right? Don't let me fuck up. You're the guy who lays bricks, right? I'm just describing the building, right? If I tell you to lay the building out wrong, don't let me.
Done that way.
But if I tell you I want a transfusion, and you say, well, that transfusion will hurt somebody, that's the right stop. but that's difficult or it interferes with policy. That doesn't make any fucking difference at all, right? You got an order to fill. That's
There
what
you
you fill.
go. See, this is very useful conversation for me because it's like this. It's like I had delegated the information was transduced to the nursing staff by fax. It was not direct. So now I will directly order a nurse to do a thing.
Yes. Right, which is operational. It's right, it's operational. Do this, do this, do this, do this.
You.
Yeah. It's just actually, I would see people think I've had this conversation with so many Christians. It's so fun, because it's part of our problem. It's part of our problem. It's
Okay.
Christianity. It's our humility.
Okay,
right?
Go please tell me what this problem is. This is important.
It's Christian humility. It's like you don't want to be the boss, right? But people actually want the fucking clarity. Like if you say, Kurt, I need you to go do this and then this, that is so much easier for me than giving me a bunch of facts and telling me to solve the problem.
That's it. That's
right. It's just so much easier for me. And, yes. and because I can envision those steps, I don't have to create the vision of those steps, then permute on whether it's possible or not. If you tell me that and I see an error in it, whatever, so just resort to do this, do this, do this,
I like
do this,
that.
do this.
Which is
operationalize anything you can, and that's great. And the problem is it's part of this whole. When I say it's Christian, but it's also part of the whole Marxist woke thing.
Yes.
Is that if we're all equal, you can't tell. Well.
Oh my God!
Equal, and that's
what it is. It's like we're all co-workers. The hell we are.
Well, no,
wait.
It's duty, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, but think of it differently. It's like if I give you this command and I'm wrong, that's okay.
Yes.
That's different.
I expect you to tell
me that I'm wrong, right? On the other hand, I don't expect you to tell me that there's otherwise there's no other objection other than I'm harming the patient, right? If I'm not harming the patient, there's no objection here.
That's
right. Just get it fucking done. Now the problem is because of this whole thing of we're all equal, we're not doing this thing of military duty. What's my duty in this role?
That's right.
Right. And we're creating this soft myth instead of duty. The guy above me has a responsibility for his scope of competence. I have a responsibility for my scope of competency. The radiologist has the fucking anesthesiologist, right? So like, it's just duty in a system. And if we all do our duty, that's fine. So the problem is what I view as what we have tried to do under the myth of equality instead of duty. It's not inequality. It's a division of labor in duty in a hierarchical organization. And so your job is not to give people bad instructions, and their job is not to throw back bad instructions, right? But it's not to say, I think you should treat them for XYZ instead. Crystal. Right. You should be using crystals.
No lie. It's like it is. It's just one of those. It's like, okay, that was not right. The answer that came back was wrong. It was reflected back poorly.
Well, so most of the stuff is, think of it as strategy, tactics, and properties, right? And so it's that most of the time, what we see in medical confusion is these details over what are called properties.
Okay.
So both the physician and the staff understand the strategy and tactics. But, it's like giving somebody like, I have O negative, right? Blood, right? You don't want to give me, the wrong blood type, right? That's a property.
Yes.
Giving me a transfusion is a tactic. And the strategy is to overcome my anemia.
Right.
Right. But that's most of the stuff is down there in the, we're all fucking human. Right. I mean, we make those mistakes,
That's
it's
right.
the
property errors, then what you're referring to.
So like, I'm trying to think of a great example. weird thing. So see, my nose is very straight right now, but my nose is straight because a surgeon, against my wishes, changed my nose from this to this. I'm like, now, I didn't ask for that,
Huh.
but it didn't hurt me. Right, my nose, because I had an accident as a kid, so my nose is a little off like this. Just a touch at the tip of my nose, and he fixed it. Well, I'm like, okay, that's great. But the same guy put a catheter in me and scarred my you know what,
Oh,
and it hurt for so long, I couldn't tell you. Scarred my urethra, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Right, and it's like, so I've got scar tissue there. So I'm like, okay, well, that, there's two things, and the third, he didn't get all the cancer out of my neck. So I'm like, there was a good strategy, there were poor tactics, and there were unnecessary properties, right? I mean, so I'm like, I didn't use him a second time. I had a suspicion. I have unhealthy pattern recognition, as we all know, because I'm a little obsessive about these things. So I'm talking to the guy, and my radar is going off, and I can't figure out what with the radar is.
Error here.
There's an error here in how his
scan comes up with something that shouldn't be there.
Something that isn't right. And he did this behavior that was something like this. Yeah, I'm good for surgery today. And it immediately came to mind, he's addicted to something. But the problem is, I didn't see it until the day of surgery. And the day of surgery, I was so wound up.
Yeah, I understand.
I didn't say it. Within a year, he quit the practice and disappeared from medicine.
Wow.
And so anyway, so strategy, you have cancer.
Yeah.
Tactics, we do this, right? Properties, and we fuck up on the properties because we're human. That's the difference between a mistake and an error, right? You make an error in strategy, an error in tactics.
Which is interesting, because there's like in medicine, there is a multitude of error checking mechanisms in place systematically to avoid. You have to really be to get a real error of property. It should have to go through 3 people at least, and all of them have to make the same mistake in order for it to be actually done.
Well, let's take it back to the military again, because the military, at least our military, is really good at this shit. Look what happened in Russia. They don't have sergeants. They don't have the nurse, right? And so, which is the sergeant, right? The medical. What's the nurse's job? Actual implementation.
Right.
What's the sergeant's job? Actual implementation. The lieutenant tells it, go stand up that flag, soldier, right? You don't get to say how. That's his fucking job.
That's right.
That's his job, right? That's it. Right?
That's right.
He goes to the thing is that means initiative and responsibility are being pushed down. Now he's going to turn around and say, corporal whatever, and private whatever, I want you to go get flag X from storage B to, I want you to get 3 more guys from over here. And that's what he does, right?
Operationalize it. Right?
You operationalize it. So this division of labor actually says, I only need to make a decision at the level I have the mastery to make the decision, and I need to push responsibility down and feedback back up. So this is, of course, one of the reasons the Russians get slaughtered in such large numbers is they don't have a lot of trust, so they push all the authority up, and they don't have any initiative on the way down.
Yes.
It's also why they have to use threats. So you hit the right answers. Of course, you hit the right answer. You hit the right answer with the Red Queen, and then basically operational communication. You do that, and the fact that there's too much filtering in all these systems. Well, you're talking about medicine where there's a feedback loop. Now look at government. I mean, you look at some of the legislation that passed, it's fucking clown world. Some of it's really, really good. And it tends to be discrete bills. But these omnibus bills, unless you actually structure a set of bills as a trade, that
Yeah.
we shouldn't have omnibus bills.
Right, right,
Right.
right. It should be, if it was structured like a contract
Right.
as a trade,
Yep.
in the body of the contract
Correct.
is the bill, and that's the end of it.
Yep. Because then it would be, then there'd be this relationship. So the problem we have is that there's this incredible network of dependencies among our laws. And if you falsify this thing, the chain of falsifications, I mean, people think, most of the stuff you and I deal with, as citizens, is actually pretty simple, right? And of the body of law, most of it's good. It's this political law, that's this via positiva political law that's created all the problems, right? And that we all are pissed off about. The Marxist, neo-Marxist shit that's worked its way in, right? But if you get into like regular property law, there's some stupid stuff in there which is easily fixed, but I mean, there's some inequality of responsibility that the court does, and then the court is irresponsible and it's full accounting of some things, right? I mean, so there's a bunch of irresponsibilities that fix surprising. But then you get into legislation, right? I mean, I'm talking about the difference between statute code, right? It's the stuff that's settled law that survives out there every day, right? That covers most issues, right? But once you get into legislation, which is political, it's shit.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing to me. I always bring up the Forest Service as the one I think that does a pretty good job. It's the Forest Service. I don't know. I go through it every once in a while. I just pick I randomly pick a bunch of pieces of legislation that passed during the year because they're all listed in order and numbered order, right? Just go pick a couple, right? And it's just amazing the quality difference. Some of them are really, the reason I like the Forest Service is because they're afraid, right? They're afraid of being cut. So they do their diligence. You've given us this charter. Under this charter, we think this. In order to do that, we want to impose this regulation. This regulation will have this effect. I'm like, Jesus Christ, somebody knows the fuck they're doing here. Then you get these other people that are purely pandering to special interests. And you read this shit and what a fucking scam. How did this get through? or there's a section here, and a section here, and a section here, and they're contradictory. No,
it lacks falsification.
It's just we allow. It's more that the goal should be stated. It's what I have done. This goal should be stated of what you're trying to accomplish. Here's the problem. Here's the goal we're trying to assess. Here's the method we're going to try to establish to do so. And here are the regulations we're going to put in place to operationalize that, right? The problem is, until, as Luke brought up yesterday, until last week, thank you, justices of the Supreme Court yet again, is that they basically said, we're not deferring to regulatory agencies anymore. The court's going to demand that regulations are held to the same standard as legislation. Thank you. Luke was making a big deal out of this yesterday because I don't think people understand how important that decision was. That decision just gutted the deep state's ability to act behind the backs of the American population and outside the auspices of the law and the legislature. So some of this stuff, this regulatory crap, right? It's just completely out of hand. I mean, the reason we're treated so badly by the public service industries is because they can make up their own rules instead of having the rules passed by the legislature. And those rules that the legislature passes survive in court criticism. I was going on a rant there and I forgot what the hell it was. Sorry, too many.
You were talking about operational communications.
Oh, it's just operational. So they have to operationalize this stuff. So I mean, if you get into some of this legislation, I use that as a curse word. Into some of this legislation, it's crap. And then the regulatory stuff that's behind it, it's like, we need to pass it and then we'll read it later.
Jesus.
I mean,
they just did it. They just
What?
did it with their red flag gun laws. Like, hey, well, let's have all the congressmen. They're gonna vote on a blank piece of paper, and then they'll discuss it after. Like, why do you? That's not. You can't pass a blank piece of paper as the law that you have not seen nor read.
Well, technically, this is one of the problems. The houses can do that, and then say the House and the Senate together can compose it, right? But that's a subset of the House. So that allows these people political cover, these senators and these representatives political cover to pass something that they can't be held accountable for. So no, there should, I mean, there can be a reconciliation committee, which is what they're called, right?
Right.
Or, and then send it back to each place. But as far as I know, the way it should work is the House, anybody can draft a bill, even the Senate, and it can be sent to the House. And if it makes it through the House, that's fine. Now, the way it works is it goes both directions now.
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, that's okay, right? But that doesn't mean you get to have but there's a reconciliation. Those changes have to be enumerated and explained, and then it has to go through the process again. This idea of reconciliation then ascension to the presidency is completely out of hand.
It sounds illegal.
It is, but we do it. That's why we get to fix it.
Well, it has to be. It sounds like it needs to go to the Supreme Court and test it.
Well, see, here's the problem. It probably has. It's an amendment issue, not a Supreme Court issue, because the Congress, the Constitution allows the Congress to define its own processes and procedures.
Okay.
This process and procedure is defined in the Constitution, right? But it's not defined enough. It's like my big criticism, one of my big criticisms of the Constitution is that something can can go through the House, through the Senate, and to the president, but it doesn't have to pass the court.
Right.
And I want it to go from the House to the Senate to the court and then the president. Because if it doesn't, I don't want this whole thing of let's fuck the people, let them fight over it and see if we can get away with this.
So
shit.
it's like intentionally generating controversy and problems in the society.
It also makes for lazy legislators. I mean, it's bad enough that you have people say stupid shit like the famous Pelosi line of let's pass it, let's do it. But I mean, most of these people are so ignorant of basic economics, they should be sitting in a house of government. There ought to be, if you don't have.
Yes.
I mean, that's why the natural law is so important, because it's economic, it's stated, and that's all we talk about. People don't, it's the science of decidability applied to, explained in economics and codified as law, right? Or, no, I mean, science of decidability, economic, the universal explanation of all human behavior in economic terms, which is value neutrality, and the common law, which is the limits on our behavior that limit us to those things that are within the natural law of reciprocity. So I mean, we use this term natural law, which I don't want to have to change the goddamn name of what we do again. We already had to go from proprietarianism, which is a philosophy, to natural law, which is a bridge between philosophy and science, just to the science of decidability. I mean, we could go. I don't know. I don't want to change it again, but the reality is that that's what we're talking about: the science of decidability, the expression of all cooperative decidability in as value neutrality using economic terms, and the codification of that as limits on our behavior and law. So they don't, if without that basic understanding and without the constraints we've added to the Constitution,
yes,
there's just too much openness for mediocre people who are ideological and unmeritocratic to make it into the House and the Senate. Not so much the Senate, but certainly the House. Make it into the House where they can learn to be incompetent on the job. and the public suffers this. Now, you know, I want to do a little thing on Curtis Yarvin again, because I disagree with him. I mean, disagreeing with people you're 5 degrees different from is so much easier than disagreeing with people that you're 360 degrees, you know, I mean, you're way 180 degrees from. But you know, he's like, well, he's basically arguing for monarchy. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not monarchy that matters. It's not republic that matters. It's not democracy that matters. It's rule of law, that by the natural law, that matters. And then the rest of it, just how many people need to be in the decision-making process. Monarchy's fired for small scale. You know, a republic is bigger for slightly larger.
Also about scale, right?
It's all just about scale. And of course, my argument is that you always want all 4. You want the natural law, you want a monarchy as a judge of last resort, you want a senate for the territories, and you want a house for the population. You want a lower house for the people who are outside of it, which is what the church used to do. You want an upper and a lower house, you know, the Senate, an upper lower house. And if you have that stuff, then everybody's got a say. And you know, you can just handle this by you can use different voting criteria for different kinds of problems and whatever. I'm not exactly against democracy. I'm certainly not in authoritarian monarchy. Authoritarian monarchy and a rule laws probably is the best system if we can get states down to 10 million people. But you're going to have to put these empires together, like the United States, you know, 300 and some odd million people, and have a monarchy. It's just impossible. Not unless the monarchy is limited to strategic decisions in trade, right? Military and trade. Because otherwise, I mean, most of these issues that people care about are norms, traditions, and values, the local phenomena they live with every day. That's what they care. That's what they want. That's the problem with the right and left, is you have the irresponsibles on the left and the responsibles on the right. And given that that's the core issue between us, you can't resolve the difference between responsibles and irresponsibles without the institution of marriage being more influential than the individuals, because marriage is what compensates for cognitively female bias for responsibility and male bias for responsibility, that produces an average distribution that's above the median, sufficient to maximize responsibility. I just did another one of those things there and I didn't realize I was doing, but I mean, it's just, that's what marriage does between men and women. It weighs the system in favor of responsibility. The way we've got it, the left wants to have it, is weighing it toward the individual, and in maximization of evasion responsibility to weigh it toward irresponsibility. Well, if you look at the difference between civilizations, it's just the degree to which responsibility is pushed down to the individual. And I don't mean responsibility, not only individual responsibility and responsibility for family, but responsibility for commons and nation. Only for reasons I've explained and others have explained, only Europeans have managed to make us responsible for the commons. I mean, capitalizing. Where everybody else says, I'm responsible for the morality of these people. Islam's a great example. No, you're not. If that was true, you wouldn't have corruption. But we're responsible for the commons, meaning we even police corruption. So, you know, that's the difference between the different groups. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out to be partly genetic and partly cultural. For the genetic thing, we probably can't fix without, you know, working on that for a couple generations. But the cultural thing, it turns out it's way, as you and I have explained to the population over and over and again, hopefully through repetition and sticking, is that group strategies are fucking impossible to change.
They won't change.
Well, they can. They usually change in the wrong direction. You know, so
I don't think it's like the group strategy won't change because they're going to double down.
They always double down.
So the only way for it to change is to destroy the group's cohesion.
Correct.
And you prevent them from speaking their language to one another and communicating, and destroy their capacity to reproduce their culture.
Well, so I'll argue this side is that if you have you keep immigration, you know, down in the single digits. In other words, it's most important. If no group can get above 2% or 3%, right, they will slowly be over 3 to 4 to 6 generations.
They'll learn how to assimilate.
Right, but the problem is you can't have it above that, because any group that can get above really 1 or 2%, they start to seek not adaptation, right. Instead of adaptation.
That's right.
And so that's why you start to have problems at 6, 7, 8% minorities, and you have catastrophic problems at anything over 10. Is that the minorities will find in the value in group bias higher than their value of adaptation, and this variance increases depending upon how identifiable the group is. So if you're Irish, you're gonna Irish are all over the place now, Scots Irish, whereas they were considered like blacks were, right? And the same for the Ashkenazis that are outbreeding, right? That are marrying Christians, right? And Asians, within 6 generations, you won't know the difference. You already can't tell the difference in 3 or 4. So I mean, so with the South Americans, they're already half white, right? And they're already Christian, and they're already pretty conservative, right? So they just need time, right? But if a group can form cohesive resistance movement like post-war Jews or like the Catholics did, you can, despite the fact that Catholics seem to be the best guardians of our Constitution, which is something that just fucking amazes me. It shouldn't amaze you. It should be obvious. So anyway, these things can happen, but you've just got to keep you've got to keep this sort of absorption cost so overwhelming, right? In other words, you have to keep the pressure to integrate so overwhelming that it's irresistible. You
That's
can't
right.
get
You want
ahead
it
with
to
that.
be
You
high
can't get ahead
value.
without doing it. Right.
A high value to adapt to this civilization.
Now, the contrary indicator is major trade cities. It's kind of nice to have an Asian quarter. Quarters are nice because what you do is you get to put those people in a quarter, and they get to preserve that culture. You get to sample it, and it's
Right.
trade, but you don't have to fight it.
That's right.
And so it's like San Francisco's Asian sector. And we all loved that when it was right.
That's right. It's specialization in trade.
Right. And so it's part of the trade cycle. You're a different culture with different whatever. And we want the trade with your culture. And that's having a a mission, which is a quarter, which that culture exists and integrates whatever. That's tends to be useful because it promotes trust and trade between the people. It also helps you export some of the goods that's in your culture. Like most Indian food we have is basically their wedding food.
Right.
Right. So the kind of stuff they have at weddings. Right. It's freaking awesome. Right. But I don't want to fight Hindu culture. And I don't like what Hindu politics are sort of doing to some of our areas, because it's a more effeminate culture, an irresponsible culture, despite the talent that comes with the upper class that we're getting. So, I mean, I go through every culture and complain about what it's done, including our own. Like yesterday, I was explaining the problem with my people, WASPs, right? Is that we've spent so much time taking responsibility for the commons, and we've made the quality of life so great per dollar that there's really no attraction to building these cities, these immigrant cities, because because it turns out Little England is a really awesome place to live. I don't know if you know what Little England means, but it's the Anglo model. I have to go into it. You can look up Little England and you'll understand what it means.
There you go.
It means English village life.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't get much better than that, actually.
No, that sounds about right.
So and then if you have your trade cities, that you have the access to novelty without costs of fighting off lower trust people's norms, traditions, and values. So, I mean, I'll criticize everybody, it doesn't, and compliment everybody. I mean, it'd be nice if we had Asian dedication to education, but our example is football, American football, is that we were building a military caste that was for rule, whereas the Asians were building a bureaucratic caste for rule. Right, where the Middle East was building a priestly caste for rule. where the Indians created a caste specifically for rule and bred within that caste. Brahmins. So you have this, we all do this same thing by some means. Strangely enough, the military turns out to be the best way to do it, which is weird. But under rule of law in the military, it turns out to be the best way because it's just odd, but you would expect
it is just an accident is all
it's just an accident. It turns out to be the best way. Because militaries have the right military and economy have the least fault tolerance, right? They are extremely intolerant of failure.
Higher feedback cycle.
Right. They have
pressure.
what they call military epistemology is the best epistemology, right? Business epistemology is the second best epistemology, and judicial epistemology is the next best epistemology. And so, I mean, okay, what did we just do there? We just said that which part of the triangle we've got judicial. We got commercial, military, and judicial, and we don't have priestly feminine epistemology being good epistemology. We have
they were oddly not mentioned in the.
They were oddly not mentioned.
I noticed that, by the way, so you were aware.
Now, so this is different because there's a difference between pedagogy and epistemology. So you see what magic I'm drawing in there?
I like that.
So the purpose of the priestly is pedagogy. It's to teach children and women because they're children, and beta males because they're sort of children. I was trying to get a reaction out of you on that one. I thought I'd get a reaction of not mentioning the priestly edge of the triangle. I didn't get that, and then
you're painting me as some kind of a robber, sir.
No, I just like it's just great that that I can still get away with some of this shit, and then I can use the excuse of getting away with it to illustrate the point for the audience, so they equally find humor in this, and maybe they remember it. But good. I mean, really, you have you have military trade epistemology, and judicial epistemology, which is the axis of all three, right? Interesting enough, it's a shit feminine epistemology or theological. It's shit epistemology. On the other hand, it's great pedagogy.
That's the important part.
Yes,
it's pedagogy. It informs the intuition of the people.
You got to go from that corner. So again, we always draw it like this, which is an equilateral triangle with a point on top, which is the commercial, the military, and the judicial in the middle, right? But really, it's this way. It's on its side with the pedagogical, commercial, and the pedagogical, theological, or feminine, mythological, and the masculine commercial, and the masculine military. So it's really, you've got to grow from that left-hand side point of the female pedagogy into somewhere in that triangle. But if you don't have that pedagogy, how the fuck do you get there? You don't. I think I think something you like something there.
I am studying it. It's right. It's like that's right.
So pedagogy,
the feminine is the source.
You have to get
the source.
You have to get humans somewhere. They start from
the
nothing.
Source. And so that's the source. And it's like the source is informed by the masculine side, which extends from this like force on the base, as you have drawn. I drew it like this.
Yes, exactly.
So force is Mars, and antimony is ethics.
Yes.
Is trade.
Yep.
But it pivots on the judiciary.
But you can fill in anywhere in that triangle.
Yes.
Right. We all do, because there's only three means of influence, persuasion, and coercion, and we all pick a spot on that based on what our abilities and biases are, and that's evolution did for us. But the point I was trying to make, because I don't think I've made it before, at least in this forum, is that it's not good epistemology over there in female land, but it's good pedagogy.
Yep.
Right. And so what happens is you're trying to get someone from the infant or feminine point of view, where they need pedagogy, over somewhere into that triangle between, that is judicial, that allows you to cooperate depending on your industries. And so that's in other words, it allows me to make the point that there's a difference between pedagogy from nothing and epistemology from everything, right? All right, there's a big gap there. And so I feel like I pick on, justifiably, I pick on the feminine theological and pedagogical all the time, because people try to use it as epistemology, not pedagogy, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that's just pedagogy is trying to teach you. That's via positiva. At some point, you have to mature into independence, and you have to either operate by rules or you have to operate by outcomes, right? You go from imitation, or basically you go from obeying mother to having some set of rules that you follow, right? Till you eventually have some set of outcomes that you understand. Right. The problem is that it takes a lot of knowledge to work falsificationary from outcomes. Whereas you have to get people through pedagogy to the point where they understand the world enough to be able to switch to rules, and then from rules to outcomes. And outcomes are falsificationary. So falsification only works if you have enough knowledge to falsify what you're working on. So it's a big jump to get people from pedagogy to epistemology. Did I make that?
No, yes, it's perfectly clear to me.
Okay.
Now I wanted to add another point on this. There's another triangle which we have not discussed, which is attached to this other triangle.
I'm trying to turn this into something about sex. It's not happening.
I'm not going to do it. But I am going to add this bad behavior quadrant here, which has this Greek symbol for X, which is chaos, which is all the bad behaviors of the female and the male in this quadrant here, which are being suppressed by Western civilization in this quadrant, and incorporated in the via positiva world of the pedagogues in charge.
Yeah, you've been making this point consistently. Is that I draw all the positiva, but I don't draw the negativa, right? I always draw the three means of coercion to get you somewhere, because
that's the natural law quadrant, or
right.
The
problem is
triangle. This is the other.
The failure points. So the question we've always had is to do this 3-dimensionally or 2-dimensionally. You just drew it 2-dimensionally. And I always wonder, is this a 2-dimensional or a 3-dimensional problem? It's probably a 2-dimensional problem. Yeah, you can do it either way. What do you give me that look for?
I'm processing it.
I don't know what I just did. I just did something. I don't know what I just did.
Originally, I drew it as a I think it's a 3-dimensional problem, because there are two axes, right? There's chaos and ethos of organization based on truth or lies. Okay. And then there's feminine, masculine. And they're like, how far apart are they? There's a expanding potential as technology improves, so that the total volume of the function increases over as the system enhances its capacity to absorb energy.
Yeah, I still think I think it's easier to understand and I could draw it in the two-dimensional form. We've done it there easier.
Very good. Good enough
Because
for me.
it's just, are we positive or negative? In other words, capturing or capturing or losing, and then are we doing it by seduction or force, right? Or in other words, or loss. And so I think the losses are all down in the lower quadrant, just like you drew it. I think that's where all the losses are, because you can't get to reciprocity up there. You can only get to loss. So
you're thieving. You're a thief or
I
something.
mean, you can't get there. You can't get there from here.
That's it.
For those of you who haven't been to Maine,
Yes.
where they talk funny. They don't talk as funny. When I was a kid, Maine people talked as funny, and Boston people talked as funny as English and Scottish people talk today.
That's right.
Right? When I was a kid, it was some of those Mainers.
Oh yeah.
It was like, I mean, if you go to Glasgow, I don't know if you've ever been to Glasgow, right? Some of those fucking people, I can't understand a fucking thing they're saying. Right. And I'm like a fan and I can't understand what they're saying.
Right.
It sounds like that.
So what is the homogenization of the dialects? It's sort of a loss. Like, and that's like, it's like it's so attenuated now. It's like I heard a person from North Dakota that was like genuine North Dakotese. I'm like, wow, that was awesome, because I got licenses all over the place. I'm like, that's awesome. And then I heard a very attenuated Southern accent in Tennessee here just the other day. I'm like, that was just nice in the lady, but it's like so it's rare.
No, it's unfortunate because I really like them. Right. I mean, I really. What was that? Santa Thurgon Marsh. You know, I mean, there's just a whole bunch of them that are really good. The California, I can't do the California R thing. The California R's, I don't know, I can't do it. But I used to really find it really fascinating. And I think the Southern thing is really romantic. It also gives you time to think about what's going to come out of your mouth. That's one of my favorite things about it, right? And so we generally have adopted the what's called the Mid-Atlantic, because that's what the news media was telling, you know, that's the media was trying to do, is to adopt so the Mid-Atlantic is our equivalent of the adopted pretense of the Londoners, so the received pronunciation. So is it Mid-Atlantic is ours. If you listen to English back just before this pronunciation effort happened in the 1800s, which is to mimic the middle class. And you listen to the English back into the 1700s, right? Or you listen to American just a few years. It's amazing how more American English speakers sounded, and as Americans, there's just a touch of that Scottish sound in there. And it's kind of sad because I actually really like that sound. The thing is, you can speak at couple of hundred words a minute in English in what we call Mid-Atlantic prose. You can speak really, really fast in Mid-Atlantic prose, and there's enough enunciation in it that it's clear. So the problem with received pronunciation is it's quite burdensome on it requires a lot of mouth, and the Southern thing takes a little time. But I just
it does. It's like this. It's amazing. So like I'm dealing with people from all over, and I really find it interesting because I'm just listening. And it's like I like the people want to just talk and tell me stuff that doesn't mean anything. And it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna see how long this train runs, man.
Right.
It's like gonna run out of steam.
Well,
I want to see how long it can run.
I actually really, it's like Italian. Italian has a lot of tonal opportunity in it. And so what's happened by our use of this highly educated Mid-Atlantic English in America is we have to use vocabulary to accomplish what was previously done with tone. And so what this has led to us is overusing emotional words, right? Wow, that's amazing, right? Because we're not doing it with tone. When I like to talk about Southern people is there's a little more of that remaining, where tonal variation conveys a lot of emotional content.
Yes.
Right. And I actually appreciate that more. And so the same thing, the Maine accent, which is basically the same thing, right? Both of these are, well, the truth, the Southern accent's actually a sort of a reaction to the received pronunciation, making it. I mean, this is a fascinating subject. But my problem with it is there's that all language migrates a certain way based on how fast you have to talk because of the rate of urbanization of your civilization. And so language matures according to this sort of pretty predictable rotation.
Higher baud rate.
Right. And so it's just really obvious. Unfortunately, you lose that ability to say things soft and sort of.
Right. So this is it. The great Southern thing.
Implication.
The great Southern thing goes like this: is the worst thing you can say in the South, right? Is you're talking to the nice blue hair old lady, and somebody's name comes up, and she says, "Well, bless his heart." It's like.
But it's a very well-mannered speech model, right? I mean, I kind of like it.
Yes.
And so Jimmy, this guy Jimmy in Newcastle in Scottish border, England, Scottish border. Fucking guy, you know, I don't know how I didn't spend that much time with him, but it was I could not understand a fucking thing he said. It was just impossible, right? And unfortunately, the same thing has happened in the States, is that we identify social class with diction and vocabulary, instead of tonal variation. Or in other words,
so it's a status function is
it's a status function
by that mechanism.
So it's just like, you know, all this homogenization. I'm not really a fan of it. You know, if you live in different parts of the country, you realize how different they are, really, and that the language, especially the media language, all adopting this Mid-Atlantic, our version of received pronunciation. It's this homogenization it's really not good, because it creates the illusion that we're more similar than we are. It creates, I mean, a Texan is a fucking Texan.
Right, because it doesn't allow you to differentiate between people that are truly different.
Right? And that's what bothers me.
Interesting, because it's like it masks the differences.
Right.
Which is,
whereas I'd like to.
Homogenization is false homogenization.
Correct. And, you know, I mean, you mentioned the Dakotas, right? But let's just, I mean, what the fuck is wrong with Minnesota? I don't, you know.
Okay, it's like this. You say a few things that strike me as the great beginning of a joke. It's just like two guys walk in a bar, and you know, it's like waiting for a punchline, man. It's like, what is wrong with Minnesota, Kurt?
Well, it's just that they're Scandinavian, right?
You betcha.
And they're also isolated, or relatively isolated, and it's fucking cold.
Not always. Sometimes. Not always.
Not always.
I define that.
But like ice fishing is a thing.
Yeah. Yes. And it is like when it's like, you know, like down here in Arizona they have boats, and it's like there they have like ice fishing sheds.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, that's something you can have, like, right? Like, and then they go for the eel pouts.
But you know, they vote like Maine. They vote absolutely. They vote as if it's local on a national scale, and they don't understand. You know, and so they're so both these places that are, you know, either, I mean, because what's English people are Scandinavian, realistically, same thing. So, but this whole thing of like Maine and Minnesota vote in ways that are absolutely contrary to the interest, because they're proper for their sensibility in their context, even though their context is only what it is because it's disconnected from the rest of the country.
It's not generalizable.
Right. It's not generalizable. So I just think that's kind of humorous, right? I mean, so that's like when I say what's wrong with.
That's what I figured you were after, something on that order.
And so you just get it. Or like, you know, I mean, it's the same thing for Seattle and Portland, Oregon, right? It's Vancouver, Canada, right? Everybody copies every government from any city that's growing copies the government that's closest. In that case, it was San Francisco, right?
Right.
So these places start out as Scandinavian, but they turn them into shitholes, which is about as good as you could get. I mean, Portland prior to this stupid shit, and Seattle, and Vancouver, these were heaven on earth, right? And they ruined them in a couple of decades because they want a virtue signal that they're as good as the bigger city, right? And so they ruined them. And so it's funny, but I mean, if you go out, you go over to, I mean, Seattle is like, remember, it's a thin strip of green, right? There's these mountains, right, with volcanoes and shit in them, right? But you cross those mountains and it's the Wild West, right? So when people say Washington votes this way, actually no, the greater Seattle region votes this way, but Washington is a big fucking place. It takes you all day to drive across, right? I mean, and that's the West.
The Cowboys aren't voting.
Cowboys and ranchers and and rolling hills, and it's Montana, right? I mean, it's Idaho, Montana. So it's the same thing in California. There's like this strip of green along the water, right? And then it's agrarian on the interior. So I was like, well, you guys talk about states doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but if you had it by district, there would be a bunch of blue city states and a vast red ocean between them. Because it's just really how it is. Because the reason you go to a city is it decreases opportunity costs, but it also decreases your responsibility for the commons. You take this as gravity, as natural, the same way the people in the opposite condition in Minnesota or Maine treat it as local, as with their local experiences as gravity. So we all vote what we are intuitions because we're too ignorant to vote the system. Right. So does that make sense?
It has to do with the scale of it. It's outside the.
Right.
It's
too big.
I can't imagine it. The scale of it and how to make that function properly.
Well, the way you make it function properly is you don't have a House of Representatives. The Senate is a bunch of governors. I mean, that's how you make it work, right? Because this whole thing of the whole problem of the House is created, which is supposed to be like the House of Commons, right? The problem is when all you're farmers, that's great. But the minute you stop being all farmers, all of a sudden the House turns into fucking chaos. So the way, of course, you handle a federation is that you just get rid of the popular vote. The popular vote is a local phenomenon. And so you limit federal voting to federal policy to federal domains, which is just defense and trade and interstate transport, and and some of the interior because you got to manage resources. But then you restrict all norm, traditions, values, and whatever to the states, and that's the easy way to solve the problem. It's this conflict between localization and centralization that's been created by the system we put in place. And the system we put in place was invented for farmers. Whereas it's perfectly okay if you get a city that's become dedicatedly blue because it's got the issues that large immigrant cities get, just put a wall around them, right? And make them into city states so that the territories will have high opportunity costs instead of low, and have high costs of maintaining the commons instead of low, and high responsibility of maintaining commons instead of low. Well, then you need two different sets of behaviors. So the way to solve it for the United States, of course, is to really just is to make the federal government what it needs to be, is a court for the adjudication of differences between states. And then put all the rest of the power back to the states, and you'll see a market for polities the way we see in Europe, which is what the country was designed to do, and is the only way to allow for political markets. And
so city-states, though, city-states, in addition to states.
Territorial states.
So territorial states is so two distinct states generated.
Any point at which you no longer have to be responsible for commons you depend upon. In other words, at the minute you're a rent seeker on density, then you have it's the number starts between it certainly is a million, but you start to get there at even 300 to 500,000 people. So the whole point there is that, is to let people produce the commons, the norms, traditions, values are suitable for their environment and their populations. Well, you can't have low responsibility, low trust values in territories because we're too responsible for too many square meters of space and time versus a city person who basically free rides, right, on everything. I mean, that's why you go to a city when you're young, is the opportunities are hanging off trees. You can live on nothing, be responsible for nothing, get a little apartment with some friends and have access to all this stuff. And then like a crow, once you want to mate, you go out to the suburbs, right? Because now you've said, I can pay higher costs of commons. Or right, even though, but I have higher income because I'm in proximity to a city. Whereas you get outside that, you have a lower income, lower proximity to opportunity costs, but I have higher costs of maintaining commons. So I mean, if you stop thinking people are equal and stuff is all equal and it's all whatever, you start breaking down a problem operationally, the problems become relatively simple. So you just need different norms for different responsibilities, and responsibility decreases as you decrease population density. Responsibility increases as you decrease response. Right. I can call my neighbor if I live in a building. I can feel safe because I can scream and my neighbors can come save me. I grew up on a farm where you couldn't throw a rock. You could see the next house, but it'd take you a while to get there.
There's a we talk about Virginia farmers and shotguns.
Yes,
is all it is. It's just like you're responsible because there's just no way in hell.
Right, no one's going to get to you. So that's a higher cost. It's a higher risk per square meter of density, right? Square mile, whatever. So we know this is the simple. We've known. I mean, economists know all this shit, right? But they're sort of bound up by all these big lies, which are coming to an end now, catastrophically. So these economists.
This is good.
Well,
this is because it is the crisis of the epoch. It's like the humans are in a crisis because we've exhausted opportunities.
Correct.
At this level of organization, for this type of organization, we are exhausting the opportunities, and this is, you get a crisis. That's Quigley.
Yes.
And the crisis is increasing the pressure for something to happen, and Quigley calls it the evolution, the tensions of evolution, which is the critical energy being added, which is the agitation or emotional input necessary to cause us to move off the well that is no longer producing what it used to produce.
Right, and their well is all the false promises that came out of the Industrial Revolution, the promise of endless growth. The promise of endless growth was supposed to save us from the 4 laws of the universe: scarcity, scarcity, physical scarcity, the 3 laws of the universe, the scarcity, human nature, and evolutionary pressure, Darwinian evolutionary pressure. That's what all the left's lies, or calls all the female instincts, are based on evading those 3, and then the use of violating the 4th set of laws, which is the logics, right? Science, truth, to explain how they think they're going to get away with it under the false promise of endless growth. So, I mean, it's a really simple what went wrong. I mean, what you and I talk about this fairly regularly, and we can talk about that's what went wrong at the conceptual level, what went wrong in the Industrial Revolution doing our institutions, what went wrong in our legal systems, and what went wrong by the introduction of women into the polity and economy. We can discuss all these things that went wrong. The question is, how do we fix them when everybody doesn't understand those things are dead? Those lies are dead.
Well, it's like, okay. Now, I'm going to tie this into, I was listening to Martin Armstrong. He was interviewed this morning. I was listening to it. And he's famous for having, this is for the audience, he's a famous trader who has demonstrated great competence in his trading ability and has developed an artificial intelligence system that understands monetary history of the world forever.
Martin's
And he's like this. He's predicting a 2032 time frame before it all becomes unraveled and re-raveled.
correct. I just want to point out that every single person who's looked at this problem since the 1930s has said the exact same thing after a lifetime of study.
What,
Does-
2032?
That's, well, he says 2032.
Right.
I said 2020 to 2030, most likely 2025. You can't get any more accurate than that, right?
No, it's right on the money.
Right. So, you can't. But look what Smith and Howe said. Look what Turchin said. I mean, look what Kondratiev said. Look
Yes.
what the Long Wave followers said. The Long Wave Institute said. Everybody, and that's like, I'm just giving the ones off the top of my head that I know where people can go find, right? Although Turchin's probably the best. It doesn't make any difference. Why? The fucking Romans knew it. The Romans talked about it, right? Because they had enough institutional history to be able to see the problem. The problem is most governments don't last long enough to develop an institutional history. The only governments that are old in the world are England and the United States. Everybody else has a government that's very old. I mean, fucking England is like, basically, it's over 1,000 years old. So you have to have institutional memory to be able to look back and see the patterns of history. Well, the Romans knew this. We know it, right? I mean, at least some of us do. I certainly did. I was writing about it in 2004. And by 2006, I was like, it's going to play out like this. So far, the only thing I really got wrong is it took till this year for China to flip. And I thought it would happen by 2010. But everything else, I'm, within a year or two on. Well, it's because you can't, it's so fucking obvious. It's just like Quigley. You've got to, how much time and effort does it take to be able to come to the conclusion?
That's right.
It takes a lot.
It takes a concerted effort. And it's like I was studying like a mad maniac, man, about when business got crushed by the same pressure. Just imploded, like it's like a submarine that went too deep, just, and it's like, okay, so I was just working and I spend a lot of time online and I'm like this. I just, in between, I just studied the things that I was not supposed to study according to the academies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and I figured out what's really going on based, there's a huge amount of just bullshit talking about, and then the real signal inside the noise, and then pulling out the signal, teasing out the signal. And it's like, I came across Quigley and he knows what he's talking about. And it's like, okay, so then I eat that up and then it's like, okay, branch out and figure out what else is going on, but it's the same signal. And it is that's how I end up working with Kurt and making Kurt finish his book, because that signal needs to get done. And the premise of 2032 suggests that we have more time, which is the opposite of what I was talking about earlier, which is like time to get preparations ready.
You cannot, the rate at which changes happen, you can't. All we know is it's gonna happen.
That's right.
Because it's not possible to reorganize what Arnold Kling called in economics sustainable patterns of investment, production, distribution, and trade. That is an economic statement of a universal behavior. In other words, we all live in vast, complex networks from which we derive discounts on time.
That's right.
Right. And what's happening is all those previous networks are collapsing.
Right.
And who made those networks that the whole world depends upon? The English and the Americans. We made this world. The problem is we don't have the asymmetry of technology, population, and wealth that we had when we created this world. So it's not possible for us to maintain the patterns of production, distribution, and trade that we have instituted. Now, I say production, distribution, trade, but it's institutions, institutions measurement finance, invention, or research, invention, production, distribution, and trade. This whole system we've built because who invented the Italians invented double entry accounting, but who invented the modern world? It was the English. They invented the modern state and the modern world by a sequence of revolutions, beginning with the agrarian, the commercial, the age of sail, the agrarian, the commercial, the financial, the scientific, the empirical, the scientific, the industrial, the technological, and the medical. Now, arguably, it's Americans that did the medical, but until then, it's really it's either all the English or the Germans. And we just created the labor force that made manufacturing cheap, the way China has created the labor force that made manufacturing cheap for those inventions. So China has just taken over America's position relative to England, as America took over England's position in this basic thing. So whenever those things can't be the foundations of the order is going to change. But is there any way to know what order you want to have? No, you can only evolve a new order. You can try to create new orders, and you can create a competition between trials of new orders. But I'll guarantee you what's not going to happen is Klaus Schwab globalization.
I agree.
What's going to happen is most likely is that we're going to have some sort of world war or close proximity to world war. And this will accelerate, whether we have it or we don't have it, we will accelerate the restoration of norms of history, which is geographic core states controlling patterns of investment, finance, distribution, trade within a particular sphere of influence, which will resort in the heretofore predicted conflict of civilizations. And the conflict of civilizations will take over the normative discourse, the way globalization and equality and also the Marxist bullshit has taken over. So we are going to revert to normal as the windfall of the industrial revolutions and those revolutions before it are exhausted, as you had said, and the asymmetric advantage, not privilege, advantage we had during it. At this point, I expect very interesting things to happen. And if it can happen, it will. So this is going to be a very interesting time. Our job, my job, I view beginning in 2006, when I really started putting my efforts into this project, about the time I bought my new house, started putting, is that I want to provide an answer so that there is at least the chance that we go the right direction.
Right.
And I was hoping in my enthusiasm to either get the government to do it or force the government to do it before it happened by accident and we are the cleanup crew. So I would still like that to happen, but because being the cleanup crew really sucks.
Right.
So that's my goal.
Well, it becomes necessary to prioritize. So the value is to create the lighthouse, to avoid the rocks. The vessels may avoid the rocks.
Yeah.
To navigate the dangerous passage. That's all we can do. And it's like, whether or not we can prevent is to be seen.
Well, I mean, can I vent some personal frustration?
I wouldn't stop you.
So I'm like, I'm watching Curtis Yarvin and Mencius Moldbug try to move back from CEO to public intellectual. And I really like this guy, but he's just another literary, but the thing is, people listen to the literary philosophers. Right. Because it's a pseudoscientific version of moralizing, which is what all history is. It's what all philosophy is. It's just pseudoscientific moralizing. It's not bad, but it's just mostly fantasy moral literature. Then I go over to the next step and we get Lindsay, who's not writing fantasy moral literature, but he is doing literary criticism.
Yeah,
Right?
he's rich, man. That guy is
And
just
he's
hitting
fucking
on all
rocking it.
cylinders, man.
He's rocking it, right? And he's irreverent. He's joyously irreverent about it, which is what, of course, I find really attractive about his. And the thing is, he's being successful because he's using literary criticism. But it's really hard to go from criticism you agree with. It's like libertarians' false promise of the non-aggression, but it only it doesn't mean anything unless you know aggression against what. And then how do we manage that? Well, so Lindsay's doing a great job of literary criticism. He's showing what's wrong with the thing. But that allows each audience member to still feel that his feelings about what we should do are legitimate. Does that make sense? So it's like the half truth. The half truth of it is criticism. It allows everybody out there to think they agree. Well, they agree with the criticism, but then that doesn't mean they agree with the solution.
Okay.
Now take the next step to us. We're doing the science. We're saying what the solution is. This solution then doesn't just say, here, you agree with me because I'm criticizing your enemy. It says, here's what we would do about it. And it's not easy, like sitting back, relaxing and listening to literary critique, or sitting back, relaxing to storytelling. I don't want to criticize Yarvin because I've done enough work to say this is what he's doing. He's just doing mythologizing. I don't know why I have a problem with that word. I shouldn't have a problem with that word. And our good friend James Lindsay is doing literary critique. This is criticism. But the minute you get to saying, okay, what to do about it, right? You're actually allowing people to have criticism of the solution of you, right? Yep. And you're also opening the doors for the fact that, well, they can always all agree on how to criticize the enemy. They can't agree on how to criticize, what to do about it. And so that's the problem we face, is that we're saying, here's the solution, here's what it is, it's scientific, and worst of all, it's not empathic. In other words, right. It's purely rational and scientific. So at worst, we're saying some of the things you actually might believe in, because everybody's a little bit at fault here, are going to go out the window too. And so it's a very adult thing we're doing. And these other things aren't really that adult.
They're less adult.
They're less adult. And so it's like, how do you overcome? I mean, this is not a skill I have, right? I mean, I can do true.
Now, this is interesting. No, because I have this issue, and I was talking to my people about it. The level of conversation that you expect when engaging in conversation with people who have varying biases that may cause you to come into conflict with them. And I tell them this, it's like when I'm dealing with people who are incapable of adult conversation, I don't try to drag them into it, because it's a waste of effort and too much heat gets generated and it alienates them.
Well, that just says we shouldn't try.
No.
That's what I'm asking.
Not at all.
Okay, well,
what it does is glass half empty.
Keep going.
It goes like this. The issue is some having further conversations with Dr. Enriquez's group. And those guys they're having some very weird conversations about God and just mythological conversations, just highly inflated in tone.
They're doing fantasy moral literature. They're doing LARPing.
Yeah, but see, they have me in there with them. And so it's like this. So I bring it back to science. And then they're left to reflect upon that. Because they're not wrong, but they're just talking in inflated terminology.
Okay, so how does that mean?
It's like
So-
it's like the conversation will evolve towards operationalism. That's where it will evolve to, because it has no other way to go. Because ultimately what's happening is the pressure is forcing the resolution of the crisis. As the pressure increases, and the solutions have to be operational.
Oh, I see. So they can talk about all the ideas they want, but until those are discursive fantasies. But the minute you have to talk about what are we actually going to do here, you have to bring them down to
Right. So they get to sit back in the faculty lounge, smoking pipes and drinking whatever they're drinking, tea, I suppose, and having good old chuckles and shooting the breeze, because they're not under pressure yet.
Right.
And the pressure, when the pressure gets there, they will be forced to presume to be operationally functional.
Correct.
So until that time, offer them operational language and allow them to understand what that you understand. So they recognize they're that you're a column standing holding the roof up. And they will be gravitate towards that because it's the column that offers the support. It's the light that offers.
I don't know, dude. So that might be true. What I find is it's a great filter.
How so?
Is that the vast majority of people are interested in these subjects precisely because they're LARPing. In other words, it's a form of entertainment. They're not. That's all it is.
That's
It's
because
play.
they're not under enough pressure yet.
Right. And so what happens is the serious guys, they're all the same.
What's that?
Right. The same personality, the same, and they're just actually intellectually honest
And dutiful.
and dutiful. And so you have a lawful. What happens to these other guys is they just go somewhere where they can LARP some more, because it's just video games for them. And so most of these people in these discourses are playing video games, and what they like is playing the video game. They don't actually want to do any work. And so, what we found consistently is, we'll get 100, take a field of 100, we'll get maybe one.
Okay.
If you go to the university level, university level, it'll be at least as bad, if not worse.
Probably.
Because these people are highly invested in the post-war fallacy system. They're in the false premise.
No, I understand. And so my assessment of this is that the financial system will come to ruin. Is how this is going to play out. It's good. They will be ruined.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think the economy will bring us to a level of wealth more commensurate with how Europeans live. I believe that there will be a pressure. In other words, we will have a decline in our standard of living. Will continue because we've already had a decline in productivity, and we've been since the 70s, and we're living on momentum of the USA and debt expansion. I believe that we will go that Europe is already equilibrated to a net standard of living because they don't have the advantage of the dollar. So my view is we'll drop to European standards of living. You gotta understand, the average European is as poor as the average Mississippian. They're poor. That's one of the reasons they have to have all these government benefits. They're actually too poor to have the kind of goods we have. So I suspect we'll fall to somewhere closer to that level. It's not as far down, but somewhere closer to it. But I don't see, I have a very hard time seeing anything, the rest of the world not phenomenally worse off than we are. Because we're paying the middle class, those people out there who are complaining about their incomes or whatever, and they have been stagnant since the 70s.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are paying for the increase in quality of life of Chinese. You don't understand. The average Chinese lives at a standard of living of an equatorial African. It's only these few people in these cities that lives above the standard of living of an equatorial African. Or China, or India. What would happen if the global trade system goes and half India? Well, Indians are culturally able to do that. So I think there's going to be huge cultural upheaval here, economic and cultural.
Where here?
In America, in the States, because we're going to have to go through this change. But I still think we're going to be so much wealthier than the rest of the world that it doesn't, we're going to feel we're going to have a reason to be positive. In other words, we're not going to see that there's still too much room for us to find good to be so overwhelmed. And I think if we can solve the problems of political conflict by devolving federal authority to the states, and the federal authority isn't needed if we're not policing the world patterns of strategy and trade.
I'm trying to become operational with this. It's like, I'm talking about there being increasing pressure upon the public to seek a solution.
Yes.
Based upon the economics of it. Because it's
okay,
behavioral
I didn't
economics.
understand. Okay, you said financial and or monetary, and that's what I was doing. I didn't understand that you meant economic. I was making economic the same as you, so we're agreed. Sorry, boss.
So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And it's like that.
I thought we weren't, and we are.
I know, right? Sorry, Kurt.
Shit happens, dude.
Well, that was good. I think we've got to cut it because it's a long video.
2 hours and 26 minutes.
That's it.
All right, brother. We will continue tomorrow. I thought that we had a great stuff. Boys, there's a lot of clips in this one for Martin to pull out. Let's see what he chooses. His last one came out great. So
where do you publish them?
I think he just sent it out to the Telegram or to one of our groups or Signal groups.
Put it on your Natural Law Institute.
I want to wait till people feedback. I'm not going to jump in. I have to obey
I understand.
my bosses.
No, I'm good. I understand.
I have all these bosses out there. You're one of them.
I'm just one of these guys. Just one of these guys that's not quite parallel.
I think I'll send you my I have that symbol back, what I was using. I just didn't do it in a cuneiform. I have that symbol back from the early teens, so I'll show you my artwork on it. So cool. It's just we came to the same conclusion. All right.
That's it. So I'll look forward to chatting with you tomorrow, sir.
Thanks, boss.
Thanks, everybody. Get to work on these things down here, boys.
Like, subscribe, comment.
Thank you.
Make fun of Kurt, make fun of Brad.
All right.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.